seniors who are needing a higher level of care, as I was mentioning, transitioning that. We're going to go over today a couple of those steps and things we can take. When kids are, I like to tell, I use metaphors a lot, so I find it makes it easy for people to understand. When you're in grade school, students and teachers go through tornado drills, they go through fire drills, so that they know if and when the time comes that there's an emergency, we know what to do, and we've gone through that and we're ready for that. And we're going to go through some of those things to get you ready for if and when that time comes that there's an emergency, a caregiving need, that you know what needs to be done, and we can go through and methodically check off those steps, and we can still remain present with that person who needs a higher level of care. 11 seconds. A senior falls, an elderly person falls every 11 seconds in this nation, which means by the time we're done with this 45-minute presentation, there's going to be over 300 people who have fallen. And that's going to start in order a path that most people have never planned to be down. Those families, they're going to be forced to do things that they never had to imagine they'd have to be doing. They're going to have questions that they've never thought they'd have to ask, and they don't know what the answers are. In many cases, they don't even know what the questions are. Okay? So, in addition to falls, there's other things that cause a caregiving need. So it could be wandering away from home. It could be car scrapes. It could be forgetting to pay the bills. It may be a medical condition that's adjusted over time that's caused people to need a higher level of care. Missed her wrong medications. I've got one client, she knew she had to take her medication, or her mother knew she needed to take the medication. She didn't want to forget, so she wouldn't have to worry about it. She took all of her medication for the entire week at the beginning of the week, and that way she can mark it off her to-do list. That caused some problems, but again, these things happen, and you don't expect to have to ask people if they, and fortunately her daughter, when she called, said, where did you stop by that next day? Said, where's the rest of your medication? Well, I took it all. It's situations like that come up that really make people, you need to be aware of, so that when and if the date comes, you can start taking those steps to put in place a plan of action. Neglected personal hygiene is another sign that there may be some cognitive impairment for them to forget what they should be doing. Okay? Things that used to kill us now in many cases can be managed with medication. So whereas diabetes or arthritis, dementia, cataracts, depression, heart disease, those things that we've had in the past, if they weren't managed, would get worse and worse and worse, and quickly would cause us to have an early death. Now they can be managed with medications. Our life expectancy is growing by leaps and bounds. Going back to the 1900s, the average life expectancy for men has increased by about 6 years, and for women about 8 years. It's not, studies say that the first person to live to 150 is likely already living today. And that's going to continue to cause us to have situations where we have to help manage those situations as they get older. Elder care challenges will reveal stark realities of unanswered questions. The question is, who's taking care of this? Many times there's multiple children in these families. Who's going to take the reins of managing this plan of care? It may not be the same person who's providing the care. It may be the oldest daughter. Chances are it's going to be the oldest daughter if there's a daughter. 80% of care is provided by the oldest female, a female of 49 years old or older. And if you are a female who is over 50, there's a 75% chance that you're going to be providing care for someone at some point over an extended period of time. How will future decisions be made? The best way to make decisions is when you have a clear mind, clear head, you know what's going on. But what happens also when staying at home is not an option? When you know that there's going to be a problem? My grandmother was 87, 88 years old, and she fell in her bathroom. She fell, she broke her hip, she couldn't get up. She was in her bathroom for a day and a half before someone checked on her. She couldn't get to the phone. This happens, and at that point we knew she couldn't come back after she finished rehab. And from that point on, that was the last day she was in her home when she was taken out on a stretcher, on a gurney. She never came back to her home. From then on, she had to figure out what the next phases of her life was going to be. First in rehab, then in independent living, where she could get some care brought in, and eventually to assisted living, and at the end, skilled nursing care. She never thought about how she would want her care to be provided if and when that time came. And so our hope is today give you some of those tools so you can start having these discussions with the people that you care about most, so that when and if that time comes that they need to move you out of the home, they're aware of what your wishes would be and how you'd like that to be taken care of. So again, my name is Keith Piscitello. I'm a certified financial planner with Wells Fargo Advisors. We've got a team of 4 in our group, and one of the biggest portions of our practice is, again, helping families manage that transition. There's so many moving parts and so many questions that people have, they don't know where to start. So when we meet with clients, we go through an 8-page questionnaire and touch on everything that we're going to cover today so that you have those answers. We know what the questions are. You know what the answers, hopefully you know what the answers should be. If you don't know what the answers are, you've got some time to stew and think about those and ponder those. Have a dialogue with your family to figure out who's going to do what. Who's going to be in charge of medical decisions? Who's going to be in charge of the financial decisions? Who's going to make sure that the bills are being paid and that the medication is being picked up and delivered? Whatever those may be, as we move on. The problem is elder care giving is challenging, it's stress-inducing, it's complex, and most families haven't planned for it. Is there a better way to do it? And the answer is yes. There's a solution is that if we put together a caregiving plan, if we go through the steps now before it's an issue, and we can think through those things and touch on the high points that we need to make sure are covered, if and when that time comes, when we have that fire drill, we have that tornado drill, we have that caregiving issue that comes up, we'll be ready to address it, rather than finding ourselves in a maze, lost, not knowing exactly what we should be doing. What's the most important consideration as we start thinking about how to solve this problem? What do you think the most important decision is? Anybody have a guess?
Who makes the decisions?
Who makes the
Having a discussion about it.
The number one thing is we want to make sure that the person who's receiving care is getting the care that they need, that their loved one's continued care is being managed. They haven't been forgotten about, that it's being taken care of, and someone's addressing it. The number one thing is going to be the medical. Okay, we want to find out what medications are they on. We want to find out when we sit down and have that discussion, what doctors are they seeing? And what is their prognosis? What kind of care do they have right now, and how will that change over time? Will there be a higher level of care needed down the road? Will their health situation change to a point where maybe you can't do it yourself anymore and additional care needs to be brought in? The biggest priority is making sure the loved one is taken care of, though. Okay? That window closes quickly in many cases, especially if there's a cognitive issue that comes up. We want to make sure that we can get as much input from your loved one as possible, and in terms of how do they want their care to be brought in, what do they want their living conditions to be like, and also having a difficult discussion about end of life. How do you want to have your care at the end of life provided? Do you want extenuating concerns to be made to try to extend your life if the quality of life isn't what you were hoping it would be? Or do you want it to pass with dignity and just be comfortable? Having those discussions and bring that out in the open, we're all going to die at some point, and unfortunately it's more difficult to talk about these types of topics in many cases than it is having the birds and bees discussion with your young children as they're becoming teenagers, unfortunately. And when something's uncomfortable, many times it's pushed off to the back and not addressed. So we want to make sure that waiting and putting it off isn't the option that we choose. We want to make sure we can start getting that input now while we can take into account and the loved one can provide those answers to the wishes that they have.
And the kicker is the medical community does not tell you what is involved in prolonging your life. My stepfather suffered crazily because nobody told him basically that inserting a feeding tube in. They were saying, oh yeah, you could drive if you had a feeding tube in. No, I'm sorry, excuse me. And they bamboozled our family. And the poor man, honest to God, it was torture.
Fortunately, there are a number of wonderful resources here today, from geriatric care managers who can help put together a plan, home health agencies who can bring care in depending on what the level of care is. There are communities that are here that have assisted living, memory care, independent living. Anything you may want is here, and you just need to ask. Or if you don't know where to ask, starting down and sitting down and starting a care plan will help guide you what's appropriate for you and your loved one in terms of finances, in terms of resources, in terms of where they want to be. And every time I see this picture, I think she's the happiest looking person for dealing with a loved one who needs care, and he looks a little bit concerned to me, but that's okay. Talking with your loved ones while they're still healthy, designating a coordinator or team leader. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's a trusted friend, maybe it's someone from the church, someone who can take the reins and help make the decisions and drive the discussion, and also make sure that the care is being provided. We want to find someone who can be the manager of the care, not necessarily the provider of care, someone who can watch over and make sure that things are taken care of. Money is an important factor to discuss. We're going to treat each situation differently, depending on what resources they have. We'll get into a little later in the conversation Medicare versus Medicaid, and when we want to spend things down and look at that. But everyone should have this conversation by the time they're 60. If you're not there yet, maybe you've got a parent who's over 60, you should have that conversation with them. Again, at our table at 512, we have a wonderful pamphlet on beginning that conversation. If you feel awkward and you don't know how to start that. If anyone saw the movie not El Camino. No, it was a Clint Eastwood one where he's living in the city. I'll think of it later. Eldorado, El Camino. He had a car. El Camino. Where his kids were trying to have that unfortunate discussion with him, and on maybe you should start thinking about looking at a different place where they can take. That's the wrong way to approach it. We have some scripts that we can give you that'll help open that discussion in a way that doesn't put them on the defensive, or don't put you on the defensive. If you want to have that discussion with your kids, here's what I'm thinking I'd like. What do you think about this? What are the main issues we should address when trying to unravel and solve this problem? Well, there's 4 of them. We're going to go through them. Caregiving plan must address medical, legal, financial, and personal issues. Okay. If you stop by after today's appointment, we have just ask me at my table. We've got this family guide to caregiving, which will go over a lot of the information we're going in this, so you don't have to worry about taking detailed notes. If you want to take notes, you can. Feel free. If you have questions at the end, just put them on the review, and we'll make sure we get back to you with any answers directly if we don't have time today. Okay. So what is a caregiver plan and what does it do? So a caregiver plan provides a communication framework for discussing what ifs. What if you can't walk anymore and you need to be confined to a wheelchair? How do you want that to work? What if you can't make medical decisions for yourself? Who do you want to make those decisions for yourself? What if the prognosis for you is very dim and we don't think there's going to be a chance to have the type of lifestyle that you've dreamed of having? Do you want us to continue down this path? What if you can't make the decisions anymore and you've lost the cognitive ability to remember who we are. Do you want care to be brought in? Do you want to go to a community where they work on that? So the care recipient's wishes and priorities will be taken into account as we build that care plan. Finally, we'll also assess the needs in medical, legal, financial, and personal areas, and then we'll organize what resources are available to help. It could be, resources aren't always money. It could be, who is the family? Who are the friends and close people who are closest to the loved one? Who's closest in terms of proximity as well? If there was an emergency, who would be the first one to be called to come in and do that? If there's a problem that comes up, who's going to be managing that? So in medical, we talk about the activities of daily living. So when there's long-term care, when there's a lot of these insurance policies, as well as when you look at communities, they want to know how many of the activities of daily living, those things we do every day, does the loved one need help with? And that's the things that you do first thing when you get up in the morning. Eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, continence, and transferring, moving from the bed to a chair, getting around the place. The other activity of daily living or trigger that is sometimes used for qualifying for a long-term care policy is whether or not you have the cognitive impairment as well that would make you a danger to yourself or others as well if you're left alone. So if you need, usually on long-term care policies or many of the insurance policies, if you need assistance with 2 of these 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, 7th is cognitive impairment, 2 of these 6 activities of daily living, that is the trigger that gets that policy started, or at least the elimination period started. We'll get into that a little bit as well. If they're still at home, what type of help is needed around the house? Okay, options, if you can't be there all the time yourself, would be maybe a visiting nurse who can come, senior helpers, in-home health aides, which get a little more expensive, as well as live-in help. Maybe there's a family member who decides they want to move in, or they want to move that loved one in with them. An elder care specialist or coordinator who's ever in charge of that can help families manage this issue and many others. We're looking at all the resources. We want to review insurance policies. Okay. Medicare covers some, but not much of long-term care. So we'll look at other things. Do you have a Medicare supplement? And if so, what is that coverage? Do you have life insurance? Sometimes life insurance policies can be surrendered for that cash value to provide for care over an extended period of time. Or sometimes life insurance policies have a rider on there that allows you to take money out of that policy, access that death benefit ahead of time that you can use then to help pay for care. Is there a long-term care insurance policy? And if so, what does that cover? We'll work through all these policy options with you and give you some guidance on what resources and can we use these to help provide that care for you. We'll help request in-force illustrations to show if we stop paying on this policy, how's it going to perform going forward? If we take money out of the policy, what's the impact that going to be on the long-term death benefit and the viability of that policy? What's the best use for these policies? Sometimes life insurance policies were bought for a death benefit, but they have living benefits that are available that you can tap into as well. So we'll work through that with the insurance company to make sure that you have all the answers that you need on those resources. We'll review their long-term care funding options. If you do have the long-term care policy, we'll discuss, look over those activities of daily living we just discussed. If they're unable to handle those, what happens then? Is there elimination? And an elimination period, easy for me to say. If I start talking too fast, just tell me slow down. I want to make sure we get through a lot of this stuff before we run out of time. So we'll look at other options. Maybe a reverse mortgage is the right option. We'll help you decide whether or not providing money from the home equity is an option that we should consider as well if other options have been exhausted. Again, I said earlier, Medicare does not cover long-term care. It's going to cover some care to be brought in, it's going to some rehab after a 3-night stay in the hospital, overnight stay. You want to be careful because hospitals don't always tell you what they want to hear. Recently, hospitals have been penalized if there's readmittances after they've sent you home. And they've got to cover some of those costs themselves, and they can't submit that back to Medicare like they used to. So what they started doing is they'll hold you for observation, and they won't admit you. Because once they start admitting you, then they've got to take care of that. So when you go to the hospital, they may hold you for observation, but you're not technically admitted, because then they don't have to worry about being readmitted if you're not. So you want to ask these questions when you go in there.
I got stuck with that for observation, and then more of the bill fell on me.
Correct, instead of going to Medicare, and that's...
And this has nothing to do with Medicare. I'm not eligible for Medicare yet, but it still screwed up my insurance, because my insurance policy said, you weren't admitted, you're so the hospital benefit doesn't admit, and yeah.
So we'll put you in touch with people who can make sure you ask the right questions when you get that admittance, so that you're not left on the hook.
Yeah, we just went with that. They admitted my wife for 2 nights for observation, and I specifically asked, is this can be covered by Medicare because you're not admitting her? And I know we have 3-day thing. She says no. It's some of the things that have changed with Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
If it's coded, Medicare is all about
depends
coding.
coding, right? So there's a lot of things. So there's 2 programs. There's Medicare, which is for anybody who's over 65 or is disabled. Medicaid is for those people who've run out of assets and are indigent. So that's when the state and the federal government will come in and pick up the tab on anything that Social Security and any pensions don't cover. Okay, so that's income based, and as long as you have assets, we want to protect those assets you have. If you don't have those assets, then we'll help you get onto the Medicaid program, and the options are going to be a little more limited with that, but we'll make sure that we can get the best care available for you. We also want to review any Medicare insurance policies. There's parts A, B, and D. A is for hospitalization, B is for your doctors, and D is for prescription medicines. We also want to make sure that how those premiums are being paid. Also, if there's a Medicare supplement or a Medigap policy, we'll make sure that you understand what that's covering when those premium payments are due, so that we don't lose that coverage. We're going to spend a couple minutes now talking about legal documents, and there's another legal document topic that's going on. Fortunately, these are all being recorded, and you should be able to view those if you missed something. There's a lot of things that go into getting your loved one ready from a legal standpoint as well. Power of attorney. There's 2 types of power of attorney: a medical power of attorney for the loved one, to the caree to appoint someone to make their medical decisions if they're unable to make them themselves. The healthcare agent directives. There's a will, which tells the state how we want assets to be distributed upon their passing. Unfortunately, will only takes effect after that loved one's passed away. It doesn't do anything if they're disabled or if they're still alive. That's where a trust comes in. So if you have an attorney, we can work with your attorney to make sure that these are up to date. If you don't have an attorney and would like a referral, we work with a number of attorneys that specialize in elder care. They'll work with you to make sure those are in place as well.
So can you do a trust if the person has already had a stroke, already possibly going to the nursing home, she has a will, but is it already too late to do a trust?
So I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you the specifics, but we can,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Some of it comes down to their capacity to make decisions.
Okay.
The healthcare directive and power of attorney should be considered priorities. The healthcare directive is sometimes referred to as a living will. If I can no longer, if my death seems imminent, do I want extenuating circumstances to be made to prolong my life or not? My great aunt took care of my godmother for years. She was a single mother and took care of her. When the time came that she was bedridden and near her end, my aunt, my godmother, who was her daughter, took every possible step to prolong her life and keep it with her out of guilt, I think, because they never had that discussion. What would you want to happen if you're in that situation? And so she used her own judgment and said, I think Mom would want to be kept alive as long as possible. And I doubt that was really the case, but out of guilt and out of everything that Mom did, she couldn't say goodbye and do that. So having that discussion early on, when you have clarity, is important. If you've got kids, and I've got 4 kids myself, there's some I would trust with money, there's some I would not trust with money. There's some I would trust would follow my wishes from a medical decision-making standpoint. Others, I would want to sleep with one eye open if I could, I think. But you'll know best who your resources are and who your family members are, or who you'd want to make those decisions, both from a financial perspective as well as from a medical perspective. And identifying the right person is going to be key. And start thinking about that now for yourself, as well as for a loved one if they're in that situation. There's 2 types of powers of attorney. The first type of power of attorney is a durable power of attorney. That takes effect the moment it's signed. So if there's a durable power of attorney, once it's signed, it's in force. Okay? If that person wants to make decisions for you, usually the durable power of attorney is used for financial matters, if something ever happens. The springing power of attorney says, we'll let you continue making your own decisions as long as you can. It takes effect once you've been diagnosed by your medical doctor saying you can no longer make your decisions for yourself. That could be either because you don't have the capacity mentally to make those anymore, or it could be because your health is deteriorated to a point where you just can't make those decisions anymore. Medicaid Asset Protection Plan. This is something we'll work with an attorney if that's something we're working on. We want to maintain and protect as many of those assets as possible to pass on. If that, again, we want to make sure your needs are being taken care of. But there's a 60-month look-back period. It used to be you could just transfer everything into a trust, say I don't have any assets anymore, and go on Medicaid and have the federal government pay for your care and the state government pay for your care. As part of the Deficit Reduction Act of 2008, they now included a 60-month look-back period, 5-year look-back period. So if we think that it might be a situation where we're going to run out of money, maybe now is the time to start putting a plan in place so that 60 months from now, 5 years from now, when we need to get on Medicare or Medicaid, we've already done that step, and that window, that look-back window is closed, and we don't have the federal government does not have the opportunity to look back. The Medicaid office doesn't have the ability to look back and see what has been transferred out.
How could they do a look back on your home?
So there's a couple different ways your home is covered, and there is an exclusion that the non-Medicaid spouse has and is allowed to maintain that home, so that it's treated slightly different than other investable assets. They want to make sure you still have that, and they don't want to put you out on the street. So there's a certain level of home equity that can be maintained as well and allow you to stay there. But depending on the value of the home and how long you've lived there, and if it ends up getting sold, then there's other cases. But we can, if you'd like, you have a discussion offline on how to manage that.
Is there actually attorneys who deal just with elderly care?
Mm-hmm.
And they're listed under what? Elderly care?
The National Association for Elder Lawyers, NAELA, .org is a good location to look for that. There are a couple, and it's in the brochure I'll give you, which has those resources for you too. But there's local groups as well. I'm part of the Northwest Suburban Estate Planning Council, and there's 15 attorneys in the Northwest suburbs who specialize solely in trust and estate work and working with elders. Okay, we want to review or create the estate plan if there is an estate plan in place. Again, I told you the will only takes place after death. In some cases, the family member or the loved one has spent some time to put an estate plan in place, but they did it in 1980. Chances are things have changed since 1980 in your life. You may have more grandkids, you may have in-laws or daughters-in-laws and son-in-laws that you want to take into account. Maybe the person who you wanted to make those decisions for you from a medical perspective or from a financial perspective aren't the same people now that you want to have do it today. So updating those, and again, laws change, tax laws change. We want to make sure we have everything up to date. The other reason is sometimes, even a power of attorney for health care is too old, the hospital will decline to accept it. They'll say, you know what, this isn't the form we use anymore, this is too old. He may have changed his mind. We only take something that's 3 years or newer. So constantly updating those, making sure that they're as current as possible, both in terms of current law and also the decisions that you want, is important. When a will doesn't suffice, consider revocable living trust. The revocable living trust is an agreement that you're still in charge. You name a successor trustee after you can no longer make those decisions, but that takes over in the case of disability, as well as after death. That successor trustee comes in and will help with the distribution of assets or managing that. That could be, the successor trustee could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be an organization as well. There's trust companies out there that do that if you don't have that yourself. So financial, this is where my role comes in most of the care planning. We want to take a look at all the finances. We want to take a look at sources of income, what their expenses are. If in many cases it's been a long time since that person has sat down and actually had to do a budget. We'll do a budget, we'll figure out what are those expenses we have and where's the income coming from to cover those, including taxes. What are the assets and liabilities we have? So we'll do, if you're familiar with accounting forms, we'll do an income statement, which is kind of your budget. Here's the income coming in, here's the expenses going out. We'll also do a balance sheet. Here is all the assets we have. Here are all of the liabilities we have. Okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to best manage those? The house is going to be an asset that we have. Are we going to keep it in the family? Is it something we're going to sell? And if we sell it, what are we going to do with the proceeds of that sale? How are we going to best manage those to make sure that they're going to provide for the care that's needed down the road? Talk about income and expenses, pensions, IRAs, annuities, life insurance. My wife loves to make puzzles, and these are the puzzle pieces. And you come to us with the puzzle pieces, but the most important puzzle piece, I tell my wife, is the box top. What is the end result supposed to look like? Once we know what we want the end result to look like, we can figure out how the puzzle pieces where everything should go. So we'll work with you to see what all the puzzle pieces are, and then try to help you organize them, and we'll work with you to make sure that we're going to have the end result that you guys envision. Assets and liabilities. Some things are more liquid than others. If you've got a collectible, my mom's got a Hummel collection, which she thinks is worth $500,000. We can't figure out who's going to tell her that it's not worth anything that you paid for it, and no one wants Hummels. But it's important to her that it's value, it's priceless to her. And God bless her, it brings her joy, so we'll let her have those as long as she needs to. But I don't think you're going to find them in any of our kids' houses when she does pass away.
Garage sale.
Garage
Not
sale.
even.
Estate sale.
Play pigeons for skeet shooting.
You can do that.
I work for an antique mall, and this stuff that people.
Our goal is to see if maybe the Donald Lee Stevens has a Hummel museum in Rosemount. We'll maybe donate them. Some things have value. I've got a father-in-law who has a scrapbook that was made when his great-great-aunt was the traveling secretary for the New York Giants for her honeymoon. They had a barnstorming trip, and they went overseas, and they played against all these other, they actually played against the White Sox on a traveling road show to introduce baseball to Europe. And they kept all the clips and the, that's worth something. We may fight over that. I got it. My other grandfather, who lived to 97, had a share of stock in the Green Bay Packers. And everybody was fighting over who gets the Green Bay Packers stock. I'm a Bears fan. I let someone else fight over that. But we want to review current investments and savings. A lot of times, I have a client who came to me and said, you know what, I don't know if I can afford to move into assisted living. So what do you have? She had 17 different accounts at 10 different institutions. Had no idea how everything fit together. Most of it was sitting in savings accounts and CDs, not earning anything for her. And we put together a very conservative investment strategy that instead of getting her less than 1% return, got her about 5 or 6%. And when you've got $500,000 when that's sitting doing nothing, 5% of $500,000 is $25,000 a year in additional income to supplement what she was getting from Social Security. When everything was said and done, we pointed out to her that not only could she afford to live there, her daughter could move in with her there as well and stay there until she was 120 and still have about $400,000 left over. It's not what you have, it's how is it working for you? Is it optimized for you? Is everything working the way it should? Now, are the puzzle pieces in the right place? It's tough to make a puzzle when there's a couple pieces that are not being used and they're off somewhere else. If you don't have that corner piece, you never know how long the edge is going to be. You can guess. Working with a financial advisor, we can answer the questions, create a strategy that you're comfortable with, and that's going to help you achieve what you're working towards. And then that's another thing to take off your shoulders as the caregiver or as the care planner. We've got someone who's managing and watching and making adjustments when they need to be made. Review titling and beneficiaries in all accounts. This is one of the biggest I'm sorry's that we hear. I'm sorry we never took the time to look at who the beneficiary was in your life insurance. The life insurance proceeds are going to your ex-wife. You don't want to hear that discussion. We're sorry we never changed the beneficiaries on your 401k for work. It's going to, it's not going to your children, it's going to your ex-wife's husband, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, that everything is going to transfer the way you want it to when and if that time comes, when the time comes. And the only time you can't make a change in beneficiary is after you've passed away. So we can still make those changes. It gets more challenging, but we want to make sure and confirm that the care recipient's desires and needs are followed and that everything goes where they want it to go. We often find mistakes. And it's not due to negligence, but it is due to negligence. It's not due to someone being angry or upset. Best way to do this is not to do it yourself. You know, it's hard to make these decisions, but if you have a team of people, and we'll work with the professionals that you have already, attorney, accountant, your insurance agent to get everything titled properly, to get the plan in place, work with the family as well, but it's a team effort as we work through that. Understand the tax situation, not as much as a deal in this case, but we want to make sure that we're managing capital gains. If and when we sell things, we want to make sure that we know where the money's going to be come from to pay real estate taxes, other things that come up. We also want to make sure that there's tax breaks if you're entitled to, that they're taken care of. If you work for an employer and you're still providing care for your parent, maybe there's some benefits you can get, tax breaks you can get through your employer, through an employee assistance program to help support some of these caregiving areas. We'll create the financial plan and monthly budget. We're running out of a little bit of time here, but the most important thing, second most important thing, is to make sure you're taken care of. As a caregiver, it's important for you guys to make sure that you're taken care of. That, you know, when you're on an airplane, they tell you if the oxygen mask drops, take care, put yours on first before you take care of the kids. Because if you go out you're not much of a help to your loved one. Same thing with a caregiving crisis. If you don't take care of yourself and you break down and get burned out, you're not going to be much of an assistant to them and to the family. So looking at those options that are available, staying at home, moving in with a family member, moving to a retirement facility or assisted living, those are options to take some of that caregiving needs off of you and share that burden. We'll give you some information on eligibility for public benefits. That's in the fold-out brochure. If you want one, come see me. You got to visit me at my step because I didn't bring them with me here at my desk. Writing a letter of instruction, which is one of the final things. We want to make sure that, and then sometimes it's a letter of instruction, sometimes it's a video. It's not technically a legally binding document, but it gives the family an idea of what their personal wishes are. That could be end of life, that could be funeral, disposition of tangible assets. What does my mom want to do with the home collection? If she can tell me what she wants done with it, we can try to take care of her wishes and follow her wishes. But it also gives more of a personal connection to those assets. If there's a grandchildren, you want to say, you know what, I've got this money set aside for you in a trust, but education is really important for me. So you'll get your share of the trust when you finish graduating from college or when you get through high school. I've got another client who said, you know what, my heritage isn't very important. I want to make sure that my kids go back and visit Greece and see where I grew up and see the type of life I lived before they get their share. This is about 10:30, so we're going to finish the last couple things. Secure and update important documents. When you work with us, we create a digital storage for you, and we'll maintain copies of that. So if and when the time comes and you say, you know what, I need a copy of my power of attorney, I'm on vacation, can you email a copy of the power of attorney to the hospital so they have it and they know they can take information from me? Great, we'll do that. If you need a copy of your trust because you're doing a real estate transaction and they need to make sure that you're the trustee, we'll have that. We can get a copy off to you wherever you need it sent to. We keep copies of the beneficiary designation so you know that those are going where they need to be. And if there's a letter of intent, we'll keep copies of that as well. And you'll have access to that yourself. Digital vaults are important. Everything is triple secure. You probably have other questions as well. Caregiving always impacts the rest of the family. Again, we talked about the 75% of caregivers are women, female, average age of 49. 65 million caregivers, which is about a third of the U.S. population at some point will be that. Take care of yourself. You are susceptible to depression and anxiety. Get yourself a support group. That could be friends, that could be family, that could be the church. Find a way to take a break. There are a lot of communities that will take a respite stay, where if you say, you know what, I just need you to take Dad for a week, let me recharge my batteries and I'll come back and pick them up, they'll do that. It's a great way to see if that would be a fit for your loved one as well. Take care of yourself, and there's other resources that are available. Geriatric care managers can help you identify. Visiting nurses, adult daycare is popular. In-home aides, respite stays. But schedule some time for yourself. There's resources that are out there, bill payments, going with to take you to nurses' appointments. All you need to do is ask. There's plenty of resources available to help you out. Technology is going to take an increasing role, and this is a longer presentation than I anticipated. Usually it's an hour, but we'll be done. Make sure if you can keep your job, that's important, if that's important to you. Family Medical Leave Act, there's a lot of resources that are available to you to make sure that your job is waiting for you when you come back. But also understanding, talking to your HR department, what benefits might be available to me to help manage this reaction.
Is Family Medical Leave Act throughout the United States,
Yes,
or is it a state?
It's a federal
All right, because I thought my younger brother told me that in Wisconsin they don't have it. So.
No, it's a federal law.
Okay.
That's what
federal.
Scott Walker would like you to believe.
Well, no, that's what my brother would like me to believe. Yeah.
So the best way to do this is a team approach. Working with someone, helping having someone who's been through this before, a care manager, a financial advisor, and an attorney are usually the three key people to make sure that everything works the way you want it to and things go the way you want it to. So I will leave, engage your family members, you know you're going to do that. Those are the 4 key challenges. My contact information is, we'll meet with your family as well, is right there. The 917-0076 is my cell, so if I'm out of the office, feel free to give me a call. I'll call you right back if I'm meeting with someone. Again, I'll be at booth 512 if you want to stop by. I'll be happy. Anybody who's here, anybody who's not here doesn't get the family caregiving guide. If you are here and you want a copy, stop by and we'll get a copy for you as well. And if you wanted to schedule some time to look at your own situation, we'll be happy to walk you through what it would look like, ask you those questions, make sure you have all the bases covered. I appreciate you coming out today. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for some individual questions. Otherwise, I'd be happy to talk to you offline if you want to give me a call when you get a chance. Thank you. And please fill out the reviews, because that's how they know who came to each presentation as well. You can give them to me, I'll take them here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.